Thanks very much for joining us. You're outside the Parliament down there on the green. It looks like quite a decent sort of day. Could it be that we're reaching the end of as you say, this kind of insanity that we've been living through for the past few months?
Well, I hope so, and I think what's really happened is that whilst the majority of people, of ordinary people, understand the difference between men and women and don't think that children should be able to change their gender just like that, there has been this kind of atmosphere, this culture, particularly in Parliament, in Westminster, in our institutions, that has kind of run through that fact almost and ignored it. And something needs to happen to reverse the tide. And I do think that this is an opportunity for the government to put out these new rules for schools to make it clear that biological sex is important, that safeguarding important, that children with mental health problems should be treated properly and with compassion and not taught this ideology. So this is a moment where potentially the tide could be turned. So I'm very hopeful that that would happen, but obviously I'm yet to see the guidance, and it needs to be strong.
I mean, some of the guidance it is suggested will be particularly with reference to single-sex schools, and will say that if you are running a single-sex school and somebody in that school who's a pupil decides that they want to change their gender, then the suggestion would be that perhaps that school could have the right to say, well, this is not the school for you.
That's right, and already they are lawfully allowed to do that because you are allowed to discriminate on the basis of someone's sex. So you're allowed to say that men aren't allowed to use women's facilities. That is in the law, although the law has been misrepresented by some activist groups. But I think that is one area that, of course, the guidance has to address. But another area is in mixed-sex schools around things like changing rooms, toilets and sports. And, of course, it's never OK, from a safeguarding point of view, for biological males to use the changing spaces of women. That's never, of girls and women. That's never OK, and it's lawful to provide single-sex spaces. But a lot of schools have become quite confused about that, again, because of the activist groups. And, of course, children and sometimes parents put a lot of pressure on schools to enable children to use the facilities they want. And I do feel very much for schools having to make those decisions on a case-by-case basis. It's not a good position for them to be in. So this guidance should provide the security and the certainty for schools to be able to say, look, this is what the government says, this is what the law says, it's not up to us, this is what we need to do. We need to provide a safeguarding first approach. All boys use boys' toilets, all use girls' toilets. That's the end of the matter. So hopefully it'll provide the cover for schools to be able to make those clear decisions that are in line with the law and are in line with safeguarding.
And it couldn't possibly end there as well, because you've got the NHS, which is constantly sort of trying to reword documents and constantly trying to take certain words out of use and say that people who might be pregnant or people who might have the cervix or, you know, people who might have testes. I mean, we saw another example of that today. You know, it's the public sector seems to be absolutely convinced that this is the way to go.
Absolutely, and as I said in my article, this gender ideology, this idea that you can have a gender identity that's different from your biological sex, which is an unproven theory that's kind of erupted in the last 10 or 15 years, has made its way into our institutions, into our government, into Westminster. But that doesn't mean it's true, and it doesn't mean that everybody thinks it. In fact, most people have a lot of common sense on this issue. But there needs to be something that turns the tide, that allows ordinary people to stand up within those institutions and say, I don't agree with that, I'm not happy with this, I do believe there's a difference between men and women. I don't think you can change sex. I don't want men using my changing room. So at the moment, we know that lots of people are frightened to blow the whistle, to speak up for fear of losing their jobs. And it was reported just a couple of days ago about a teacher who addressed a group of girls in a girls' school with "Good afternoon, girls," and was forced to apologise by the children in the school and eventually forced out of her job. And that's the kind of situation that people face at the moment when they're standing up against this ideology. But I think if an official document comes out that sets out the law, that sets out biology, that sets out a safeguarding position, my hope is that it would give people courage across our institutions to take that common sense approach without fear.
Yes, it would be a wonderful thing if it was actually returned to common sense, which of course we are here at the home of common sense. Just before we let you go, Miriam, let me ask you about the European Convention on Human Rights. You and some other Tory MPs had a meeting with Rishi Sunak asking him to perhaps take less notice of the ECHR. How did that go?
Well, I'm really committed to this bill, the illegal migration bill. We absolutely have to stop this humanitarian disaster of thousands upon thousands of illegal immigrants coming to our shores every day, 40,000 last year. It is a disaster. We have to sort it out. So the one thing we are all committed to is making sure this bill works, that it's strong enough. And I think what we've seen in the past and with previous bills is that lawyers, unfortunately, have taken the position of trying to find any way around stopping their clients from getting deported, even if they have have arrived here illegally and shouldn't be here. And what we need to make sure is that there are no loopholes in this bill, that there are no ways for lawyers to exploit those issues. So, the Prime Minister is convinced that the bill is strong. I very much support him in the bill, and we just need to make it as strong as possible. But it comes back to Parliament next week, so we'll see what it says.